I wanted to discuss and follow up on the Peru-Bolivia regional archaeology, specifically at Taipicala, which later was renamed to what we are all more familiar with, Tiahuanaco, and to a lesser degree its sister site, Pumapunku, which is 1.4 kilometers to the south. We will stay focused on the site creation period and partially enter into the early phase 2 period. A lost culture and/or civilization appears to be behind the creation. Let's begin with the oldest build and occupation period, which is known as phase 1. The location contains monumental structures, with the oldest build being a more complex design and construction, which should make us all consider the possibility of who was here, occupying the area during its earliest and greatest stage, prior to what appears to have been a catastrophic event taking place, with only certain structures and artifacts surviving. Now remember that there was a phase 2 and phase 3, which was at a much later date built upon and above the phase 1 level. So the site appears to have been constructed to worship a creator god, quite possibly Viracocha. Or could it also be that whoever were the gods were the creators, or at least the architects of this original level? Of the earliest accounts of Tiahuanaco, Captain Pedro de Cieza de Leon's is of great interest. He visited and documented the site sometime between 1540 to the year 1550. I'm going to quote him directly here as follows. Tiwanaku is celebrated for the great edifices near it, which are certainly things worth seeing. Near the buildings there is a hill made by the hands of men, on great foundations of stone. Now quickly, just remember this was the earliest phase build for the site. Cieza continues, beyond this hill there are 2 stone idols of the human shape and figure, the features very skillfully carved so that they appear to have been done by the hand of some great master. They are so large that they seem like small giants, and it is clear that they have on a sort of clothing different from that worn by the natives of these parts. Cieza continues to state, near these stone statues there is another building. Their antiquity and the want of letters are the causes why it is not known who built such vast foundations, and how much time has since elapsed, for at present there is only a wall very well built, and which must have been standing for many ages. Some of the stones are much worn. At this part there are stones of such enormous size that it causes wonder to think of them, and to reflect how human force can have sufficed to move them to the place where we now see them being so large. Many of these stones are carved in different ways, some of them having the shape of the human body, which must have been their idols. Near the wall there are many holes and hollow places in the ground. In another place, more to the westward, there are other ancient remains, among them many doorways with their jambs, lintels, and thresholds, all of a single stone. But what I noted most particularly when I wandered about over these ruins writing down what I saw was that from these great doorways there came out other, still larger stones upon which the doorways were formed, some of them 30 feet broad, 15 or more feet long, and 6 inches in thickness. The work is of grandeur and magnificence when well considered. For myself, I fail to understand with what instruments or tools it can have been done, for it is very certain that before these great stones could be brought to perfection and left as we see them, the tools must have been much better than those now used by the Indians." End quote. In concluding his account of the ruins, Cieza de Leon tells us that the local indigenous people of his time period said that a race different from the Incas built Tiwanaku long, long ago. This thought has been repeated over and over from those that visit the site up until present day. The 2 most discussed thoughts: 1, the remarkable size of the stones throughout the structure, and the second, their great antiquity. 2 last points to also address. First, the stones discussed were in a finished, worked condition, massive in size and weight. Imagine how big the stones were in their original condition, before these unknown masons started working the stones. And second, no matter where you dig, you find buried, worked stone, meaning the complex at its earliest stage of existence was immense in size. Now, unfortunately, many of the stones were repurposed by later groups in the area, especially the Spanish. This tends to be one of the biggest ways that history is lost. The past ends up getting altered. What else needs to be discussed here is that we continue to be told there was no written language in the Americas. We need to greatly reevaluate this outdated belief. Much of the pottery and the tapestry appear to have iconography and symbols showing repeated patterns, meaning written documentation taking place. Formal writing. If you look closely at certain pieces on a more recent Phase 2 period, they appear to have creatures that supposedly went extinct before modern-day man appeared. Maybe science isn't as precise as academia makes us believe. Last, I also want to talk about one Father Bernabe Cobo, who visited and studied the site during the early 1600s. The father tells us of the first archaeological work ever carried out at Tiwanaku. The excavator was Don Juan de Vargas, who was the first encomendero of Tiwanaku. This was a nice way of saying he was the holder of vassals or local slave labor. It appears that in the 1540s, Vargas was in Spain, attempting to advance his interest at Spanish court and failing miserably. One day when Vargas was very depressed, a stranger came to him and asked him why he was so melancholy, he who was the owner of the richest village in the world, Tiwanaku. The stranger gave to Vargas a memorandum of how to find, among the ancient site, great wealth. Once Vargas returned to South America, he dug in accordance with the instructions which he had so mysteriously received. And he found many jars containing fine cloth and stone stools and large containers full of silver, a quantity of beads and bangles, a massive human skeleton, and finally, a huge human head of gold, whose face was like that of the statues round about in the stone walls. The night after this last find was made, Vargas mysteriously died, and archaeological curiosity was thereby greatly discouraged. The final theory of Father Cobo was that far more remains below ground at Tiwanaku than is to be seen above ground. In close, remember that what we are told about the past isn't always the right answer. Much of what we're looking for remains below ground, and a lot of that high strangeness I continue to discuss always seems to lead back to the ancient gods, the ones that were living gods, and as seen elsewhere around the world, all of them of great stature, giants. Please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Take care, everyone.